Hey everyone, this is Chris.
And Lorenzo.
And welcome to our Best of Saturday series. Now that we have hundreds of episodes, we get a lot of listeners asking us where to start.
So we'll be selecting some of our most popular episodes to share each Saturday from our years of podcasting. We hope you enjoy it.
No role plays, just real. Chris and Lorenzo share 4 decades of combined experience to help you become a more effective leader.
We've never really, as a workforce, spent a lot of time on making sure we're developing good leaders.
We'll be able to share stories, experience, mistakes, failures, successes.
This is Hacking Your Leadership.
Welcome to Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Chris.
And I'm Lorenzo.
And Lorenzo, yesterday I was binge watching The Office while I was getting some work done. It's something that I do often because I've seen the show so many times that I can kind of have it just playing in the background and kind of listen to it while I'm doing other things and not actually pay attention. And the episode that happened to be on was around conflict resolution. And if for people who haven't seen the show, it's a farce, and you should watch the episode on conflict resolution and how people who don't know how to lead teams of people can manage to mess it up. But it got me thinking about in a non-satirical kind of way. I know there are a lot of leaders out there who have a problem with conflict resolution. They end up being the referee for their employees, or they don't know how to resolve conflict. They kind of hope it goes away. It's almost like they find it easier to resolve conflict between themselves and people than they do find it to resolve conflicts between people on their teams. And, we got a lot of good feedback from our last episode on, delivering feedback on what does it look like when people deliver feedback poorly, and that creates conflict. And so I feel like this is a really cool follow-up episode on how do we resolve conflict, how do we execute conflict resolution as leaders. So have you ever been in a situation where you found yourself kind of trying to figure out how to make two people who were both good employees get along, really, so to speak, and get their job done, when all you want to do is like, come on, let's just get back to work. Why are we worrying about this?
Absolutely. I think it happens between two good employees. It happens sometimes between a good employee and a bad employee. It happens between two bad employees.
Oh, yes.
And I think to a degree, in the right cultures and environments, you actually want some conflict. Like, I know we've briefly touched on this before in previous episodes, but when you're building culture and you have really great, passionate people with opinions, and you're empowering people and you're inspiring them, you're going to get some conflict in regards to people challenging, their ideas, challenging their thoughts, and wanting to get to the best solution. Now, again, that idea works in a bubble where you're saying this is a positive type of conflict, where maybe it's not what most people would define as conflict is, people having a personal disagreement, or they're in a place where they've, maybe attempted to resolve the issue, and neither party is happy with that, or they're still having some issues, that type of thing. So as a leader, I can tell you, when you have to step into those situations and bring people together to work through conflict, it is vitally important that you allow people to express what it is, and really listen to each person talking. It can be very easy as a leader sometimes to just dive right into what you were saying, which is like, can't we all just kind of like figure this out and work together and make this kind of go away? But listening is critical, because as a leader, if you're trying to understand thematically, or maybe where there was, whether it was a rub or whether it was an element of somebody wasn't listening or the communication was breaking down, trying to understand what happened, how it happened, and who caused it is important to be able to then dive into maybe helping an individual work on skills or capabilities to not have the continuing conflict over and over and over again.
Yeah, I love what you said about how conflict is kind of necessary, or at least not necessary, but the unavoidable byproduct of a team where every person is striving to do better, or to solve problems, or to get rid of inefficiencies, or to break down things that were done poorly and now they want to do them better. I mean, that's just it's going to happen. When you have teams of people who are passionate together, there's going to be some headbutting. I think the difference lies in whether or not you view the opponent as another person on your team, or if you view the opponent as whatever inefficiency or problem or thing that you can collectively tackle together. And we see this not just in work, but we see it in politics and in any time when the desire to win starts leading you to believe that the person with the opposite opinion is the enemy, as opposed to both of you are on the same team working towards a common goal. So when it comes to conflict in the work environment, I feel like a lot of conflict isn't over what the outcome should be, but rather how do we get to that outcome? And so if you can start there, if you can start with a common ground of thinking that, okay, both myself and this other employee have the same desired outcome, which is whatever the company goal is, or whatever the new training is, or the new behavior is, whatever you're looking for as an organization. If you both have that goal, which I think you should, then the conflict can be rephrased or kind of reframed in a way where both of those employees are on the same team working towards a common goal. They're not opposing forces trying to win, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And sometimes I was just, as you were talking, thinking about very specific examples, even recently in conversations where I've spoken with, leaders of people, and where there was some conflict. And I think what can be very helpful in those situations is even going so far as to kind of reminding them of the values that we share, right? So as an example, understanding that there's conflict, talking to either parties ahead of time and sitting down saying let's work through this, because let's all agree on something first. Are we as leaders looking to create the best experience for our people, for their personal development, and to help them achieve their goals? And both parties said, well, yes. Fantastic. We are on the same exact page, right? Now let's talk about how we see that work being done differently, and what is it about your approach or the other person's approach where maybe we have some dialogue around, why we're on two different pages or why we're having competing priorities here. But I love what you said, because I think that is the first step, in my opinion, of really working through conflict amongst team members or amongst leaders, is starting with the common ground and reminding them that we are actually looking to get the same work done, or that we have the same values, or that we have the same passions, but looking for agreement first, and then having the dialogue to work through why we are, maybe having a conflict around the how we get it done.
Yeah, I love that you brought up values, because I think the area where a lot of leaders struggle when it comes to conflict resolution between people on their teams are in the idea that you as the leader need to be able to, solve the conflict without eroding the relationship between either of the two people. And when you can solve a conflict in a way that makes both people get what they want, which is rare, then you do it, obviously. That's the easy one. But I think a lot of leaders default to solutions where both people end up feeling slighted still because they're choosing fairness over values. And I think that's a very quick way as a leader to erode the confidence that your team has in you, when the right way to do it would be to make sure that whatever decision you make, you do it not even thinking about who the employees are and who will be impacted or what relationships will be impacted by it, but rather, what do my own personal values and the values of the organization say? And if that dictates what the outcome should be, then it's time to take sides. It's time to say that this is the right way to lead, even though it makes one person like me and one person not. Because if I can sit down with that person who doesn't like the outcome and say, this wasn't against you, this is why I made the decision the way I did it. It's based on this set of values that I can articulate clearly, that I share with the organization, and that if the tables were turned, I'd be making the same decision. It doesn't matter who you are, who the other employee is. It matters what is important to this organization and to me as a leader. I think that's a good way to help leaders kind of get out of this rut where they feel like, oh, what do I do? The most important thing to me is the relationship with my people. How do I salvage that while also getting rid of the conflict?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great call out, because I think it's one of those things where, we don't get to debate, the values of the organization, or we don't get to debate the integrity of what we do. So I think that, yeah, as a leader, you mentioned that earlier on in the episode about kind of being a referee, and I think the assumption of a referee is that you're the third party who has to listen to everything and kind of find where the middle ground is. But sometimes you're the referee and you have to throw the flag or say, oh, well, hold on here. I'm going to enforce, the rules of the game. I'm going to enforce the values of the organization. I'm going to enforce the expectations of the organization, or a policy or a procedure. So like we don't get a chance to debate or talk about conflict if it's in this, place where it's about, I don't agree with this policy. Well, the policy is the policy. We need to say, like, if this is what we stand for, or this is the expectation, then that is what that is. Now, if you have a conflict around maybe how somebody approached you about it, or maybe, language that they used, or things like that, we can talk about the personal dynamics of the conversation. But at the end of the day, as a leader, you jump right onto that side and say, like, this is not about, a right or wrong. This is about an enforcement of a policy, or it's something that we are absolutely not going to do with our team or with our organization.
Yeah, that's true. But I'm talking even deeper than that, where it's not as clear as a policy, where you have to actually rely on what your personal values are. So we have to assume first that your personal values align with your organization, or you wouldn't be there. So if you can say that, then the decision might have to be made based on what those values are, even if it means that there's some gray area. So policies are really clear. You can say, well, this is in policy, this is not, and then you almost don't have to take a stance on it. You're saying, I'm just enforcing a policy here. But when leaders have problems with this, I think it has to do with them not wanting to make their employees feel like they took a stance on something. That it was a subjective area where they had to kind of make a judgment call or a values call, where there wasn't a single right answer. You as the leader have to be able to make those decisions based on what fits with your values, what's going to allow you to sleep well at night. And sometimes that means having to take one employee's side over another.
It's interesting because as you were talking through that, I was trying to think of times and situations where maybe sometimes where even the values of, what the organization expects you to live by actually override a policy that the organization has also given, and I know that that's not necessarily when we're talking about conflict management in between two employees, but I have seen that happen where, one employee is looking to do something for a customer as a result of maybe something that happened, where this is kind of like we need to do the right thing here. And then another employee is saying, yeah, but that's not what the policy states. So now you're in this space where, technically both of them are right. One is on the value side, one is on the policy side. And I think as a leader, I think values override policy. So if you look at it and say, well, no, this is absolutely the right thing to do based on all the information that we have, and we need to own this and fix this. Those are the times when you can maybe override a policy, because again, most of the time we'll say policies are there to actually protect us, and their intent is to make sure that we have something that we can look at to make the best decision possible. But also the values, though, I think is the thing that you really have to spend the time in. And it can be very difficult. I can remember very specifically now, man, probably 15, 16 years ago. I'll never forget this. I had a female leader that was in the service, department of a store that I was an assistant manager. And I had to make a decision to take care of a customer, because as a team, we had committed to that customer to do something, and we had misquoted them. The employee had told them that we would do something and that we would cover it, and they were wrong. The employee was wrong, but they admitted that they had said it. The customer had told me that they had said it. And so at that point, I felt that we had made a verbal commitment to take care of that customer, and we were going to do what we said we were going to do. And that leader was not happy with me at that point. because it was like, this is not the policy. We should not do this. This is not consistent with what we would do for other customers. And I had to talk to her and say, like, look, we will talk about this, but we made a commitment to the customer, and as a part of our organizational values, like, we live up to our promises and we live up to our commitments, and we have to do this. And I did it. And then she and I had a conversation a couple hours later about that, and we talked specifically about this, and so there was conflict, there was conflict resolution that we had to get through as a leader and as another leader. But it was very much that exact conversation where it was like, we have to lean on our values in this instant, over superseding the policy. And we got into a really good place and we had some good dialogue. But that does happen quite often.
I'm glad you ended in a good place with that leader, and I completely agree with it. And with that, it brings us to this episode's 1 Minute Hack.
The 1 Minute Hack.
Okay, so for this episode's 1 Minute Hack, here's what I'd like for you to do. Get your pen and paper out, and I want you to write down the actual stated values from your organization. And the reason why is when you walk into any type of a conflict resolution issue, when you're working through the conversation of understanding what's going on and where you want to start, I want you to look through the lens of the stated values of the organization first. That should really be the priority above all things, above policy, above personal relationships, above tenure, any of those types of situations whatsoever, looking at the values. And the reason why this is so important is that the one thing that will be long-term maintaining as your brand as a leader is being able to always lean on and leverage the values of the organization and create consistency across the board when making these types of decisions. Sometimes it will not be so clean cut and so easy to do, but if you always fall back onto the values, that will help you make sure that you're making a decision that you can stand behind for the long term, and it also makes sure that your decisions are grounded in the values of the organization. As Chris stated earlier, if your personal values are not aligned with your organization values, that may be an issue, and you really need to consider that. But what should happen is, if you are aligned with the values of your organization and the leaders that work there, that should be a great starting point for making a lot of these decisions and being able to work through a lot of conflict.
Yeah, I think it's a fantastic 1 minute hack. And I think it's important to remember that values aren't black and white. They a lot of them live in the gray. So this isn't about being able to have a solution that checks all the boxes and makes you feel great about it. There might be some times where you have to make a decision as a leader where you're choosing between bad options and you're picking the least bad option. What's important is that you're able to articulate why you chose the path you chose, and that you are grounding in those values. You can articulate which value. This is why I did what I did. It had nothing to do with the person. It had to do with making sure that I was honoring this stated value of the organization. And I think if you go about it that way, you can't lose.
Yep, completely agree. And with that, it brings us to the end of this episode. This is Hacking Your Leadership. I'm Lorenzo.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll talk to you all next time.